All right. Thank you, everyone. I'm excited to be here with you all today. I will do an introduction of myself here in just a couple of moments, but as we're getting started, this is going to be a really interactive session. You're going to be active in the chat box. There's going to be a poll, different things throughout, but I need at least 3 people who will volunteer to participate with me on audio and preferably on camera. So I'll come to the same 3 people throughout the session. We're going to be hands-on working through an exercise basically to figure out how to develop your part-time staff. And so I want 3 people who will come with me and share and reflect and explore verbally in front of everyone. But it's fun, I promise. So if you want to volunteer, you can raise your virtual hand, you can raise your physical hand, or you can type in the chat box and let me know. And I'm going to get those 3 volunteers before we get started. Got 1 volunteer. Thank you, Sally. Who else is going to volunteer with me? All right, Dolores, thank you. And Susan. Perfect. All right, if anybody else would like to volunteer, you are more than welcome to. Just go ahead and put that into the chat box. I'm going to pull up the PowerPoint and we will start jumping in.
Take my hand down.
All right, here I can take your hand down, Susan. Okay.
I think we just did that at the same time.
We did.
That's okay.
That's technology. So thumbs up if you all can see the PowerPoint. We're doing good. We're ready to rock and roll. Yeah. All right. Perfect. All right. So here's what we're going to do today. So our part-time staff are often, as you know, the ones who interact with whatever we call our client base the most, right? So in your case, the youth, the school partner, right? So your part-time staff are the ones that are often the face of the organization. And they're the ones often that are delivering that impact directly. And yet they're often the ones who are invested in the least, right? It's a little bit tricky to invest in part-time staff. There's the timing of it, right? There's pay depending on the state requirements for paying staff to attend training. There's just kind of the coordination of it. You have people coming and going. And so, and there's often, I don't know what it's like in your particular organization, but there's often a lot of turnover as well. And so it's just a little bit tricky to develop our part-time staff. And so how do we, if you think about it, it's often left to supervisors to really create any training or development opportunities for their part-time staff. And so how do we do that? Supervisors may or may not have the skills or the expertise, the experience to develop the training. And so I'm on a mission to change that. I want to help program directors, supervisors, subject matter experts create better learning experiences for our part-time staff, because we do want to invest in them and we do want them to provide this really great experience for the people in our programs. So today we're going to walk through the components of an effective training, and you'll leave with a custom action plan that you can use to begin developing your part-time staff. So I know we started in the chat box entering name and role. If you haven't done that, go ahead and do so, just so I know who's in the room. Today, we're going to talk, I'm going to introduce myself, but we're going to talk about training realities, being strategic, the 3-part method for creating training, and then you'll leave again with an action plan. So I'm going to start with a poll. Who creates training in your organization most frequently? So again, if you haven't already, put your name and role in the chat box, and then we'll get this poll going. Who creates training in your organization most frequently? Is it someone in a learning and development role? Is it a program director, an executive director, someone else? Who creates training most frequently? I have about 3 people responding so far. Got about half of the responses in. Who creates the training most frequently in your organization? And I see 1 in the chat box. Thank you for that. All right. let's go ahead and share those results.
Do we want to go ahead and end the poll for now?
Yes, please.
Okay.
All right. So about 67% of you are saying the program director is creating the training. So as a program director, you may or may not have training experience, right? You probably have some subject matter expertise. You have some supervisory experience. You know probably what some needs are because you're interacting with the staff directly. But creating good training is also a skill set. And so that's what we're going to focus on today. How do we develop our staff, our part-time staff? So just a little bit of background on me, why I'm here talking to you about this. So my name is Heather Burright, and I am the founder of Skill Masters Market. And I work with nonprofits to develop the skills their people need so that they can scale their mission and impact. I'm all about aligning purpose and performance because I believe that when nonprofit leaders create the environment and the opportunities for their staff to thrive, they can reduce turnover. They can create a strong and diverse pipeline of staff. They can improve performance within the team, and ultimately they can optimize their team for greater impact. Specifically, my background, I have about 15 years of experience in the learning and development space. And I last worked at a national nonprofit where I identified the competencies or the kind of the soft skills, leadership skills that people needed to be successful throughout their career. So whether they were that part-time staff person through the CEO or a board member, what do they really need to be successful in each of those levels of leadership? And then I worked with HR leaders around the country to hire and onboard and develop their staff with those competencies in mind. I spent a number of years focused specifically on youth development part-time staff. What are the skills that they need to be successful, and how can we get training to them, whether formal or informal? So I started my own consulting business in, I guess, about a year and a half ago or so, focused primarily on learning and development. I specialize in the virtual classroom, and I also do a lot of diversity, equity, and inclusion training as well. So I'm excited to be here with you all today and share more about creating great training for our part-time staff because they are such a valuable part of our organizations. So let's talk about training realities. Let's start here. Learning, and specifically training, can help you build the skills of your people. It can help facilitate trust building and collaboration, which is great for a team environment, can add value to your organizational culture, and can improve communication and relationships among team members. So there's a lot of benefits to training, but it doesn't always happen that way. So we're going to talk about some realities of training. And so I'm going to rely on my volunteers here. And we're going to answer the question, why does training fail? Why does training fail? But, and this is the fun part, we are going to do this as a little bit of an improv activity. Don't sweat yet. It's going to be fun. And what we're going to do is we're each going to answer the question, but we're going to add to what's being said. So the first volunteer, and Sally, I'll have you go first because you're first on my list. The first volunteer will make up your reason, your excuse on the spot. Why does training fail? So you might say, it was so boring, people were dozing off. And then the second volunteer, Susan, that'll be you, you're next on my list. You'll say, yeah, I was there. You're going to corroborate. You're going to say, yep, you agree. And then you're going to embellish on that story. So, yep, I was there and it's true. It was so boring. Rod fell asleep and he started snoring. He was out for at least 30 minutes, right? And then Dolores, you will come in third and you will corroborate what both Sally and Susan have said, and you will add to that excuse, right? So you can go any direction you would like to with this. Sally, you get to start us off. Why does training fail?
Okay, I'll go with something a little bit different since you, so training fails because I already know these things. Why are we talking about this again?
So yes, I agree. I've been doing this for 20 years. I can do this with my eyes shut. I don't need to know anything else. It's all going along well. I don't know why I need to change anything.
Dolores, we can't hear you.
Now, do you hear me? I'm sorry. It's not bringing anything new to the table. I've heard this. I've been there, done that. I need a better connection. You've got to make it relevant. Make it relevant to what the problem is, the situation. So relevancy and bringing a new aspect is very important.
All right, great. Round of applause for our volunteers there. You may have heard some of these excuses in the past because they just flowed from you, from our volunteers, right? So we may have heard these excuses in the past. And there are many, many reasons why training fails. But I want to spend some time today talking about how we can make it successful. All right, so what are we going to do about it? So I take both a strategic and a human approach to training, and that's what we're going to dive into today. Before I go into the three-part method, I do want to share my recommendations. My approach are grounded in 2 beliefs that I have. So I want to share those with you so you can see this is the foundation of everything that we're going to do. The first belief is I believe that people excel when they know what is expected of them and they can show up authentically at work. And organizations can help with this by providing the environment or the culture and the opportunities or those learning experiences that staff need to thrive. The second belief is that I believe organizations are better when they empower their people to operate from their strongest capabilities, their strengths, right? So everything I talk about is really based in these 2 kind of foundational beliefs. So I mentioned that I take both a strategic and a human approach to training. What do I mean by strategy? So this is really thinking about what are your organization's priorities. So this may have shifted since the pandemic started. It may be exactly the same as the pandemic started. It may just be implemented in a different way, but it's important to be really clear on what your leadership is asking the organization to do. So I want you to take a moment and I want you to think about one of your organization's priorities right now. One. We're going to use this priority throughout our time together so that you have something actionable that you can work on. So think about what that priority is. I want you all to type that one priority in the chat box, but we're not going to hit enter yet. So just type it in without hitting enter. What is one priority that your organization is focused on? And I'll let you know when to hit enter. We're all going to do that at the same time, get a little bit of a waterfall effect. What is one priority that your organization is I can't talk today. What is one priority that your organization is focused on? And once you know what those organizational priorities are, you can align your talent practices to them. Continue typing. I'll let you know when to hit enter. While you're typing, I want to introduce an analogy that we're going to use throughout our time together. So we're going to use a cooking analogy. So your organization's priority, the reason you are cooking. So maybe when you're cooking, maybe you're celebrating a special milestone, like a pandemic birthday. We had several of them, a couple of those already. Maybe you're accommodating some special dietary need, like a gluten allergy. Maybe you're headed to a cookout and you need to make your very best contribution because you want to make a good impression, right? Whatever it is, you need to know why you're cooking so you can make the right meal. What you make for each of those situations won't necessarily be the same. So your why makes a difference in what you cook. And your organization's priority, that's your why. All right, so everybody hit enter on my count of 3. 1, 2, 3. Oh, awesome. You guys did great at this. Okay, so we have lots of priorities now in the chat box. Helping kids have the skills, the supplies that they need, quality programming with positive outcomes, donor partnerships. Yep, helping students and families succeed, recruiting participants, absolutely. Recruit, retain quality talent. Yeah, absolutely. These are all great priorities for your organization to focus on. So let's hang on to that priority and let's use that as we go throughout our time together. This is your why. So now that you have your organization's priorities, we're going to move into the 3-part method for creating training. So when it comes to supporting your staff to drive those priorities, we need to set a clear direction. We need to create the right learning experience, and we need to make that learning and behavior change stick in a supportive culture where your staff can thrive. We need to nurture that transformation. So this is the 3-part method that we're going to use. Set a clear direction, create the right experience, and make it stick. So let's dive into each of these, starting with setting a clear direction. So, keeping your priority in mind, what do you need people to do to be successful? Yes, your people have job descriptions. I'm sure they probably do. But 1, things do shift over time. And 2, 4 words for you, other duties as assigned. As an employee stays with an organization, that list of other duties as assigned tends to get longer and longer. And in the past year, especially, many things on that job description may either be irrelevant, overemphasized, or even missing. So let's take the time to think about what it is we need them to do, specifically, not necessarily that day-to-day, but specifically to drive that priority that you put in the chat box. So they say the biggest killer of performance is unclear expectations. So let's get clear on what we need our staff to do. We're going to first identify those expectations. So I want you all to think with me again, what actions do you need people to take? So whether you're strengthening donor partnerships, or you're recruiting new talent or participants, whether you're helping your students succeed, you're getting the students the skills and supplies they need. What are the actions that you need your people to take in order to achieve that priority? So again, I want you to type this in the chat box without hitting enter. What are the actions you need people to take? Be as specific as you can. What are the actions that you need people to take to achieve that priority? And I'll let you know again when to hit enter. I'm going to give you some time to type, think and type. The other thing to think about is why. Why do these actions support that organizational strategy? And how are these actions different than what people are currently doing? What is that behavior change? What is that shift that you're looking to see? And then based on your organization's priorities and your staff's capacity, you can determine what needs to start, stop, and continue. We're not always good at that stop part, but we need to be really clear on the priorities, which means we may have to stop some things or even just press pause for a little bit. So think about those skills or those actions, that you need people to take. And then also, what will it take for staff to perform those actions? Are those actions supported by stronger functional skills, so job-specific skills? Is it something they're doing on the job with youth? Is it supported by better leadership skills? Is it supported by stronger cultural competency? Okay, so the actions that you need people to take, why those are important, how that's different than what they're currently doing, and what is that supported by, stronger functional, leadership, or cultural competency. What I want to see in the chat box, and I'll let you know again when to hit enter, is the action that you want them to take. So if you go back to our cooking analogy, your organizational priority is your why. It's why you're cooking. In the cooking analogy, the actions that you need people to take, this is going to form your recipe. So go ahead and hit enter on my count. 1, 2, 3. Perfect. All right. Yes, find the people who can contribute the supplies. Absolutely. Build and maintain relationships, set individual goals, understand and identify quality programming, create an elevator speech. Yeah, absolutely. Communicate with parents, collaborate with administrators, increase problem-solving skills. Yeah, so these are great. And these actions should tie directly back to the organizational priority that you identified. All right, so the next thing I want you to do, if you are in a space where you are able to turn your video on for just a moment, I would love to see your face, because we're going to do a finger vote for our next activity. If you are not able to turn your camera on, I know sometimes we are not in a place that we can do that. Let's use the chat box, okay? So for those who can show me your fingers, the actions that you identified, are they functional skills? Is it supported by functional skills, leadership skills, or cultural competency? I want to see 1 finger if it's supported by functional skills, 2 if it's supported by leadership skills, and 3 if it's supported by cultural competency. So you go ahead and put your fingers up, or again, type in the chat box. 1 for functional skills, 2 for leadership skills, 3 for cultural competency. Great, awesome. All right, perfect. See, you guys didn't know what you were getting into this morning with this this session, right? You're having to speak out loud, use the chat box, do improv. All right, so thank you all. All right, so the second part of setting a clear direction is to understand your audience. So often people aren't meeting expectations because they don't know what they are supposed to do. I know that might seem a little strange because we feel like we're clear, but a lot of times people aren't meeting expectations because they just don't have a clear picture. They don't know what they're supposed to do. Or in other cases, they don't know how to do it, or they lack the motivation to do it. So ask yourself some questions to figure out what is it that's preventing people from meeting expectations. The first, if it's a knowledge gap, what do your people already know related to those actions that you need them to take, and what gaps in knowledge exist? So did a policy or a process change? How was that communicated to them? How will they access the information they need to perform the actions that you identified? What is the knowledge gap? Then think about skills. What skills do they bring, and what gaps exist? How might they practice those needed skills? And we're going to use that when we get into creating the right learning experience. And then if you think about a desire or motivation component, what motivates your staff? Are they looking for meaning in their work? Do they want to feel appreciated? Do they want to solve problems, feel a sense of accomplishment? This will be a little bit unique to each staff person. And there might also be a bit of a theme across a team, right? So tap into those things that motivate them. And then also consider, it is often knowledge, skills, or motivation, but also consider what other barriers might exist. What is their day like? Think about everything that your staff have experienced over the past year and a half. They may have more challenges or need more support than they would in a quote unquote normal time. So what barriers exist that might prevent them from being successful? Okay, this is all part of understanding your audience so that you can create that right learning experience. The other thing is to think about any parameters that you have. So these parameters may be part of your organization, they may be part of your kind of just logistics within your organization or at the school that you're in. So what are the parameters that you have? Figure out what's non-negotiable and think about where you have flexibility. And then if you have found that your staff have a skill gap, they're likely going to need training. And so think about what limitations specifically exist from a training perspective. What parameters might exist there? So if you're going to struggle with scheduling, are people going to have computer access if they need computer access? Are you going to have the physical space if you're going to be in person? And then think about what resources you can contribute to eliminate some of those limitations. Think about what workarounds you might be able to provide, okay? All part of setting a clear direction. And then finally, define success. How will you know? We're going to go into this knowing what success looks like. So how will you know when you're successful? And again, I want you to think of your answer here. We're going to put this one in the chat box as well. How will you know when you're successful? So you've told me your organization's priorities. You've told me your actions that you want your staff to focus on. How will you know when that is successful? What will it look like? What will it feel like? Go ahead and type that in the chat box. Don't hit enter just yet. I'm going to return to my volunteers. And volunteers, you don't need to type in chat unless you just want to. So we're going to do a quick rock, paper, scissors to see which volunteer gets to share their vision of success with the group verbally. So my volunteers, Dolores, Sally, and Susan, if you could get your hands ready. Everybody familiar with rock, paper, scissors? Do we need to explain our game? Are we good? Okay. All right. So we're going to rock, paper, scissors, and I'm just going to go in order that you appear on my screen, which is Dolores, Sally, and then Susan. So when we determine winners, that's the order I'll go in. All right, ready? On the count of 3, 1, 2, 3. All right, Dolores, I can't see your hand. Can you pick your hand up so I can see what you got for me? Oh, I can't hear you either.
May I explain my position here? Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay, let me explain my position. I'm coming from a different angle. I need you to know this. I'm from a different angle. I've only worked with CIS from a different perspective for 2 months. I'm a retired teacher, but from another area.
Can you talk a little?
And
Can you lower your voice?
I can't.
You
And
can.
anyway, I'm working in a different area. I am like a community champion. We're working with the preparedness for disaster.
Okay.
And I'm not like working with the staff of the CIS department. So I'm a liaison for only 3 schools. And I do the Hispanic portion, so we're doing preparedness.
Okay.
And so that's where I'm from. So, but I'm still learning some material. But we're having a problem because my coworker was sharing a room and it's backlash. So understand I'm coming from a different area, but I'm learning. So I'm not part of a support staff. I'm part of a coalition.
Perfect. No problem at all. And I have created preparedness training before, so I know there are still some often training needs related to that. So Sally, you had a rock, and I believe Susan, you had scissors, correct? So Sally wins. So Sally gets to share her vision of success. What is your picture of success?
I think we're supposed to be giving our position and stuff.
Okay, so my vision of success was quality programming with positive outcomes. I think talking about a knowledge gap, I think it's people or staff understanding what quality programming looks like. And, that is research based. Do you see the positive outcomes? And obviously the outcomes are measured with the student success. And in this case, we're looking at behavioral referrals, attendance in school, and of course, grades that come along with that.
Great. So you have some specific measurable things that you can go back to and say, yes, we were successful.
Yes.
Perfect. All right. If you have not already, you can hit enter on my count, and then I will continue with our analogy. 1, 2, 3. And you can put your vision of success in the chat box. Perfect. So how will you know when you're successful? This is the picture of success. You need to have an image of what you're making, the final product. So in our analogy, maybe our mom and child that we saw in the first slide are making a birthday cake for their dog. Every presentation is better with a dog, right? So this is our dog presentation. That mother and son are making a birthday cake for their dog. And so they may have gone to Pinterest or something similar to search for dog birthday cakes. And they have a picture of success. And this is what that is for them. The same is true when we're talking about our staff and staff development. We need a picture of success. So let's take a look then at the second part of the 3-part method, which is to create the right learning experience. So once you are clear on what actions you need your staff to take, you can start to create an experience that will teach them how to perform those actions. So the question then becomes, how might we? So how can you teach them to do the things that you need them to do? And yes, you hired them to do a job. So there is a little bit of that going on. And this is a bit of the human element that I mentioned, right? Staff often come to us with amazing skill sets. That's why we hire them. But that doesn't mean that they have everything they need to succeed. And so we have this great opportunity to continue to invest time and energy in them so that they can continue to expand those skill sets and achieve great things for the organization and for the youth that you're serving. So let's talk a little bit about that. You've identified the actions that you need your staff to take. And once you've done that, and notice my language here, I've been using the word actions, you can begin to create the opportunities for them to learn. So often I see organizations determine a need for training, and then the training becomes an information dump from the subject matter expert. But knowledge doesn't equal behavior change. I know I should do laundry daily if I don't want it to pile up, yet every week I end up with a load of laundry so large I question how many people live in my home, right? People know they should eat healthy and exercise, but that doesn't always mean they follow through. Think about all the New Year's resolutions that get broken. Knowledge doesn't equal behavior change. That's why I'm using the word actions. Focus on the action that you need your staff to take. They may need to know something to perform that action, but let's focus on the action first. Identify how that action is different than what they're currently doing, and let's turn that into your learning objectives. So if you think back to our work and setting a clear direction, we considered what your organization needs, what your audience needs, limitations that exist. Now we can use all of that information to determine the delivery method that makes sense for your needs. So there's all kinds of training that exists. You could have a functional skills training, you could have leadership assessments and courses, you could have diversity, equity, and inclusion workshops, you could have coaching, you could have mentoring, you could have in-person training, e-learning, live virtual training, videos, webinars, email drip training, reference sheets, the list goes on. And it might feel overwhelming to even think about all of those different options. But with that clear direction, right, knowing what your organization is trying to achieve, what your staff need to do, and any parameters or limitations that exist, with that clear direction, you can determine which solution is right for you and create the experience your people need. So do your people need to practice something? If they need to practice something, then maybe they need an in-person event. Maybe they need an on-the-job mentor. If it's a policy or a process change, maybe a reference sheet is all they need. Okay, so we're going to use all of that information to figure out how to create what is the right experience to create. And then we're going to create that engaging experience from there. You can design the delivery. So let's say it is an in-person or a live virtual training. You can design that delivery to be relevant, actionable, effective, and even fun. So think about how you can provide your participants an opportunity. How can you give your staff an opportunity to practice those actions? Think about things like how might we allow them to share their own experiences, their own expertise? They're not starting from zero in most cases. They have experience. They have perspectives. They have things to share, and we can build upon those things. That makes it more engaging. It makes it more relevant. So how can we allow them to share? How can we connect anything that they're doing in this learning experience to real world application? Maybe it's scenarios, case studies. And then how might we allow participants to reflect on the change that needs to occur? Behavior change doesn't happen overnight. So how can we help them reflect on what the change that needs to occur? We want them to want to change with us, right? We want them to be a part of this. So including that reflection is a great way to keep the experience engaging and to start the formation for behavior change. All right, so how can I provide my staff the opportunity to practice? So Sally and Susan, I'm going to come back to you for this one. We're going to use a yes and approach. So Sally, you're first on my screen, so you'll start us off. You'll give us one idea that you have for how staff can practice. And then Susan, you will yes and add to that. We'll just do a few rounds back and forth. and then we will move on to the rest of the group. So Sally, kick us off. How can you provide staff an opportunity to practice?
Have them actually implement a lesson with their coworkers on one of the research-based programs we're using.
Yes, and maybe give feedback on how that went and felt for them.
Do I continue? Is that,
You can.
we're going back and forth? Okay. And once they've gotten that feedback, maybe they try it with their students and then discuss the feedback with their coworkers on what how their students reacted.
Yes, yes. And for us, I think videotaping them in the scenario is a big help so that they can see themselves as it's working.
All right, great. So that's just an example. And again, another round of applause, because yes, and is another improv activity. You didn't know you were learning improv today, but you are. So another round of applause for our volunteers. So everyone else, I want you all to think about how will you give your staff the opportunity to practice? So go ahead, get that typed in chat, and I will tell you when to hit enter. So if you think back to our analogy, the mother and son are baking a birthday cake for their dog. So we've all seen those Pinterest fails where you have this beautiful image of what you want to make and it doesn't turn out the way that you want it to. I personally had big goals for being a mom. Like, I'm going to have the best Valentine's, trinkets or whatever to send. Never turns out the way it looks like on Pinterest. The person who made that original Pinterest image is likely an expert, or at the very least has lots of practice. It was probably not their first try. Whereas the mom and the son may not have as much experience baking doggy birthday cakes. So they need the chance to get their hands dirty, so to speak, and practice. So that's where we are in the analogy. We're going to hit enter on the count of 3. How can I provide my staff the opportunity to practice? 1, 2, 3. Yeah, so going back to the elevator speech, being able to give that to the team, listen to feedback on improvements, scenarios on paper, skits. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Role play, another great one. Great. So we want to make sure that they have the chance to get their hands dirty. They have their chance to practice, because that's how they're going to get better. So once you've identified the ways that you can allow them to practice, you can create the experience that allows for that. And once you've created that experience, you can prepare for delivery. So again, is it a live in-person training? Is it a live virtual training? Is it a video? Is it a reference sheet? You'll need to prepare whatever that is for delivery. Who needs to be involved? Is it a trainer? Is it the participant, the staff? Is it a supervisor? And what do they need to be successful? All part of creating the right experience. The third part of this method is to make it stick. So you've identified your organization's priority, you've determined what staff need to do to achieve that priority and painted a picture of success, and you've considered how you can allow your staff to practice so they can achieve success. We've done all of that in our time together today. But if you want to see real behavior change, your efforts must extend beyond the event itself, beyond the training, beyond the one opportunity to practice. So think about the culture, the systems, the processes. Will these things that exist help staff be successful, or will they provide barriers to success? So if you think about organizational culture, culture is how things get done within your organization. So it's the policies, the procedures, the norms, but it's also the values, the beliefs, the workarounds, all part of your culture. So are those things going to help your staff be successful, or will they provide barriers to success? Too many people attend training and return to work only to never use what they learned. So common mistakes that I see are when staff attend a training and they have no opportunity to apply it on the job, when the supervisor isn't supportive or even aware of what they're learning, and when other barriers haven't been addressed. So your people need the opportunity to apply the behavior change. They need an environment where they feel safe to try and even fail. And your people need the support of their direct supervisors. Those part-time staff need the support of their direct supervisors. Supervisors have a role in their staff's development, and they should be prepared to provide that safe environment for their people to take those risks, to try things. And they should be prepared to provide consistent feedback. You all mentioned in your yes and improv activity, right? That there would be feedback involved. There might be observations involved. So being prepared to provide that consistent feedback, removing those barriers, that's part of the supervisor's role. And then your people need to be set up for success, which means that those barriers, those systems, those processes that are currently in place, they either need to be removed or at least monitored to make sure that they are supporting that behavior change and not preventing it. So culture is a big topic, and I could probably spend all day talking just about culture, which I won't do. But I do want to kind of end the culture part with a final thought. We always, always, always want to lead with empathy. This is so important. If you just think about the last year and a half and everything that your part-time staff may have experienced during those last 18 or so months, right? They may have had anxiety at some point about COVID. They may still have anxiety about it. They may have lost a loved one or a friend. They may have had children home from school for a period of time, and they were trying to juggle everything that came with that. They may have been distraught about the racial injustice that they saw in the world that was highlighted in the last 18 months. There's been a lot going on. And so leading with empathy, when we're setting our clear direction, when we're creating that right experience, when we're trying to nurture that transformation and make it stick, leading with empathy is just the foundation. And it's what everything else builds from. So find ways to check in with your staff as humans, whether it's, a 15-minute check-in just to ask them how they're doing, not even necessarily about work, whether it's a team meeting to celebrate a week of accomplishments, a personal email thanking them for their work. How can we just connect with our teams as humans? These actions will go a long way in helping them to stay motivated to meet those expectations that you're setting. All right, so we talked at the beginning of the session about the training realities we sometimes face. Thank you to my volunteers who participated in that. But with challenge comes opportunity. And I believe we're at a great place of opportunity. So what do you want your future state to look like? We've talked today, you've identified an organizational priority. You've identified the actions that you need people to take. You've determined what success would look like. And you've started to think about how you can create that experience to allow them to practice those actions. So in chat, I want you to type one thing that you can commit to doing to help develop your part-time staff over the next 90 days. What's one thing that you will commit to do over the next 90 days? How will you develop your part-time staff? One thing. Maybe it's getting more clarity around those actions. Maybe it's better understanding what motivates them. Maybe it is creating and implementing some sort of training. But what is one thing that you can commit to doing to help develop your part-time staff over the next 90 days? And you can just type it in and hit enter as it comes to you. One thing you can commit to doing to help develop your part-time staff over the next 90 days. And while you're typing, I will Continue. Perfect. Provide quality training in the space to practice. Make sure they're able to put resources into practice. Great. Continue typing those in. Finding motivation. Yes. Check in with them. Yes. Absolutely. All right. So what now? I welcome you all to connect with me on LinkedIn. I'm happy to send, I have a team reboot strategy, and I'm happy to send that to you if you'd like to dig a little bit deeper into maybe why your teams aren't meeting expectations and what to do about it. You can visit my website. You can send me an email, whatever works for you. I would love to stay connected just personally. I'm very involved on LinkedIn, very active there. I love to connect with other nonprofit leaders, especially those who care about their staff and staff development, because it's such an important part of my life. So I would love to see you there and get connected with you all there. And I will leave you with this quote because I think it sums up where we are currently. So, do not follow where the path may lead. Go instead where there is no path and leave a trail. I thank you all for your participation today. Again, round of applause for our volunteers. Round of applause for everyone for being so active in the chat box. And if you have questions, I will stay on. I know we have a few more minutes that I save time for questions, so I will be here. And if you don't have questions, you're welcome to go. But thank you all.
Heather, before everybody leaves, do you have a moment to do a session feedback? I've put it on the chat room in there, so if you don't mind leaving notes to make us better for the next time. It is a lunch break after this, and there is the main stage speaker coming up at 12 o'clock, so don't forget to log back in if you are signed up for that. Our speaker is Dania Perry, Director of Equitable Economic Development at Wake County. Just want to remind you that's the next one that we have in line. Thank you for coming. Yeah, if you have any questions, feel free to submit it to us. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Hey, Heather, this is Jacqueline. Can you tell me again, like, I guess what the 4 big points are? Because I have set clear directions, create the experience, and there were 2 more.
So we started with identifying organizational priorities. That's kind of a foundational thing. And then the 3-part method is to set a clear direction, create the right experience, and make it stick or nurture.
Okay, thank you.
Heather, I thought that was great. I think you could probably apply that to really any of the staff and not just part-time.
Great. Thank you.
I think we may be okay to close. Would you like to do that? Or you want me to stay until 11:15?
I'm okay if you are.
Okay, I think we are good. I'll go ahead and end the meeting and the training. Thank you, Heather.
Thank you. Have a great day,
Bye-bye.
everybody.